Hello and welcome to the Commander's Quarters, your Magic the Gathering source that helps you command your budget. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCG player affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all their support. Hey everyone, Mitch coming in for the Commander's Core studio. Welcome to the show. So, spoiler season continues to roll on, and if you haven't seen my very early morning episode, well, depending on where you're from and what time it is there, regardless, if you haven't seen the episode on Goldspan Dragon, go ahead and check that thing out. It is an absolutely broken mythic, and yeah, I think it's going to be one of the chase mythics of the set. But as always with these spoiler episodes, including this one, I'm going to give a spoiler warning. So if you don't want to see spoilers, don't watch the spoiler episodes because they have spoilers, okay? With all that said though, let's jump into things with what I think might just be a brand new tribal staple, but we'll talk about that here in a bit. So Reflections of Littjara, and my apologies if I'm mispronouncing that, is an enchantment that costs 4 and a blue, and it says, as it enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. Whenever you cast a spell of the chosen type, copy that spell, and a copy of a permanent spell becomes a token. So yeah, the application for this card can be pretty straightforward. Do you have a tribal deck, and does it include blue, and do you want even more creatures? Then this card is for you! That was absolutely terrible, I know, but this card is definitely not. Getting a second copy of every single creature that you cast in a tribal deck is huge. Outside of lands, enchantments might just be the safest kind of permanent in Commander. So Reflections of Littjara has a good chance to stick around for a while. So for just a 5 mana investment, you double up your creatures that you're going to be casting from then on. So if you just cast one creature spell with a converted mana cost of 5 or more, congratulations, you've gotten your mana back. Essentially, I should say. You don't actually get your mana back, but you're getting double the investment. You know what I mean. Now, there aren't any cards that are exactly like this, but there are some comparison cards that we can look to. And the first one that I want to bring up is actually a recent card from Commander 2020 with Molten Echoes. It's an enchantment for 2 red and says, as it enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. Whenever a non-token creature of the chosen type enters the battlefield under your control, create a token that's a copy of that creature. That token gains haste, exile at the beginning of the next end step. So this card is very similar in a lot of ways, but different in some that are important. First off, this includes creatures entering, not just when they're cast. So for example, if you blink a creature, it's going to count that as well. And the token that you do create does have haste, but you have to exile at the beginning of the next end step. So unless you've got some Sundial the Infinite shenanigans, it's going to be gone. This card still has a lot of applications, allowing you to be more aggressive, maybe you can abuse some ETBs and LTBs, and so on and so forth. And this card actually already sees a decent amount of play in certain tribal decks out there as well. In my opinion, Reflections is going to be better because the token that you create sticks around. Another somewhat similar card-ish is Mirror March. It's an enchantment for 5 and a red and says whenever a non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, flip a coin until you lose a flip. For each flip you won, create a token that's a copy of that creature. Those tokens gain haste, exile them at the beginning of the next end step. So this card isn't tribal dependent and it can make you even more tokens, but those tokens are temporary like Molten Echoes. Again, there are applications when it comes to ETBs and LTBs as well. And I probably should have mentioned this earlier, but ETB is short for enter the battlefield and LTB is short for leave the battlefield. Anyways, moving on to perhaps a more comparable card with Bramble Sovereign. It has whenever another non-token creature enters the battlefield, you may pay 1 and a green. If you do, that creature's controller creates a token that's a copy of that creature. So unlike the others, this is actually a creature and not an enchantment, and this one actually has to pay for that effect, but you can make a token of anyone's creature coming into play. Again, this one isn't tribal dependent, but for a tribal deck, Reflections is definitely going to be a lot better than this. Now, when it comes to a tribal enchantment that sees a ton of play, I think one that comes to mind right away is Kindred Discovery. It's an enchantment for 3 blue, and it says, as it enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. Whenever a creature you control of the chosen type enters the battlefield or attacks, draw a card. This might just be the gold standard of tribal enchantments. Like Reflections, it's an enchantment with the same converted mana cost, and I think it actually pairs really well with Reflections. In your tribal deck with both these in play, whenever you cast a creature spell now, you get 2 copies of that creature, you draw 2 cards, and then you're going to get twice as many cards when you're attacking as well. Well, twice as many cards when you attack with double the creature, you know what I mean. Regardless, I don't think that Reflections is on the level of Kindred Discovery, but time will tell. But still, in my opinion, Reflections of Littjara definitely has the potential to be a commander staple for tribal decks. Well, tribal decks that include blue. Now, speaking of potential, let's talk about potential commanders out there that might really want this card. And of course, with this, we're going to be looking at tribal commanders, and I believe the most popular tribe out there currently is dragons, so let's talk about the Dragon. So the Dragon makes all your dragons cost 1 less, and then whenever you attack with one or more dragons, you draw that many cards, and you put a permanent card from your hand onto the battlefield. So the more dragons that you have in play for the Dragon, the better. Also, there are some really powerful dragons out there that you're really going to want copies of. For example, Scourge of Valkus has whenever Scourge of Valkus or another dragon enters the battlefield under your control, deals X damage to target creature or player with X number of dragons you control. So getting a second copy of that is gonna double that up. And then Uvara Hellkite says whenever a dragon you control attacks, create a 6/6 red dragon creature token with flying. So you can see where this is going. With a second copy, now you get 2 6/6 dragons whenever your creatures attack. Yeah, things can get out of hand really quickly with that. Even a legendary creature like Bladewing the Risen can really benefit from Reflections. It has, whenever it enters the battlefield, you may return target dragon permanent card from your graveyard to the battlefield. So although the Bladewing copy won't stick around because of the legend rule, you still get that ETB. And yeah, reanimating 2 creatures instead of 1 is pretty cool. The next tribe that immediately came to mind for Reflections is Slivers, and there are a lot of options for Sliver commanders, but let's just talk about Sliver Hivelord. It has Sliver creatures you control of indestructible, so yeah, now all your Slivers, including your token Slivers, are going to be indestructible. And Slivers are all about benefiting each other, and having more and more Slivers on the board is never a bad thing. For example, having 2 copies of Megantic Sliver gives your team +6/+6. 2 copies of Leeching Sliver means that whenever a Sliver you control attacks, defending player loses 2 life. And with Synapse Sliver, whenever a Sliver deals combat damage to a player, its controller may draw 2 cards. So yeah, I think Reflections can slot into a lot of Sliver decks. And if you want to see more ideas for a Sliver deck, go ahead and check out my Sliver Hivelord episode. Next up though, let's talk about allies with General Tazri. General Tazri has, when she enters the battlefield, you may search your library for an ally creature card, reveal it, put it in your hand, then shuffle your library, and you can pay Wooburg, and ally creatures you control get +X/+X until end of turn, where X is the number of colors among those creatures. So you can tutor for that perfect ally, and when you've got Reflections in play, things only get better. Maybe that perfect ally is Tadru Warcaller, which has Rally whenever it or another ally enters the battlefield under your control, creatures you control get +2/+2 until end of turn. The Rally mechanic works incredibly well with Reflections since you get that second copy. Speaking of the Rally mechanic, there's also Calastria Healer, which is going to drain your opponents whenever allies come into play. And of course, having more and more allies on the field is never a bad thing, with something like Herobrine Druid, which has tap, add X mana of 1 color to your mana pool, where X is the number of allies you control. So you get more allies, you cast more allies, you get more tokens of allies, and so on and so forth. But again, if you're looking for some more ideas on this, check out the deck tech on General Tazri. Next up though, let's talk about Eldrazi, and everyone's favorite Eldrazi, Morophon the Boundless. Which, okay, it's a changeling, which technically it's everything, but let's just say Eldrazi for this one, okay? Morophon the Boundless is a changeling, so it's every creature type, and as it enters the battlefield, you choose a creature type, and again, in this case, we're going to choose Eldrazi. And then Eldrazi spells we cast cost Wooburg less to cast, and our other Eldrazi are going to get +1/+1. Devoid Eldrazi is a really fun deck, and Reflections can really help out with this as well. Herald of Kozilek is going to make colorless spells we cast cost 1 less to cast, and again, getting a second copy of that can be huge. And then when Broodmonitor comes into play, we get 3 Eldrazi Scions that we can sacrifice for mana, and again with Reflections, we get a second copy of this, so we're going to be getting 6 Scions instead. So essentially, Broodmonitor pretty much pays for itself with Reflections in play. And of course, we can get second copies of incredibly powerful Eldrazi like Pathrazor or Ulamog. You know, it just has Annihilator 3, and it can't be blocked except by 3 or more creatures, so 2 copies, yeah, that can take over a game. And if you want to see more, go and check out my deck tech on Morophon the Boundless, which I called Morophon Eldrazi. You see what I did there? Quite clever, right? Anyways, of course, there are plenty of tribes out there that could really use Reflections, but the last one that I want to bring up today is Scarecrows. Yep, that's right, Reaper King is ready to blow up everything. It has whenever another Scarecrow comes in a player under your control, destroy target permanent. So Reflections gives you copies of Scarecrows, so yeah, now every single time you cast a Scarecrow, you get 2, and you blow up 2 permanents. Sounds like fun, right? Well, fun for you, maybe not fun for the rest of your playgroup. Regardless, I actually have 2 Reaper King episodes, and actually the more recent one is a revamped deck tech, so go ahead and check that one out. Now before this episode ends, one last thing that I want to mention are tribal spells. These are actually spells that actually interact really well with Reflections as well. For example, Skittering Invasion is a tribal sorcery Eldrazi, so it's technically an Eldrazi spell. It costs 7, and basically gives you 5 Eldrazi spawn that you can sacrifice for mana, and again with Reflections, you're going to get a copy of this spell as well. So instead of 5 Eldrazi spawn, you get 10, so you basically net mana. Another one that you might want to consider is Crypt Swap, which has Changeling, so it's every creature type, so it can work with any of those Reflections decks, and it says exile target creature, its controller creates a 1/1 color shapeshifter creature token with Changeling. And if you're going to be playing a fairy deck and you've got the budget for it, Bitter Blossom is actually a tribal enchantment fairy. And Bitter Blossom might make you lose twice as much life, but it's also going to give you twice as many fairies. But with all this said, at the end of the day, what is my gut feeling on this card? Overall, I definitely think this card is going to be a staple in a lot of tribal decks. Now, it might not ever get to the Kindred Discovery level, but it's definitely a powerhouse in decks that really want it. Getting you twice as many creatures and twice as many of their ETBs and LTBs is absolutely disgusting. But time will tell with how things for this card turn out. And with that, the show has come to a close, so it's my turn to hear from you. So in the comments below, let me know your thoughts on this episode are, and as always, thanks again and have a good one.